And welcome to this edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Hello, Ray. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Keith. Very good to be here. How are you?
I'm great. I'm going to let you introduce our guest as somebody that you and I both known for a number of years now, and talk about an expert on the Manhattan Project and specifically Oak Ridge. She certainly is.
We sure do. We've got Cindy Kelly with us today. Cindy is the founder of the Atomic Heritage Foundation and continues to be running that organization, although, as Cindy will tell you, there's been some changes over the last year or so. I'm proud to be on her board for that organization, along with several other much more noted individuals that have helped her over the years. But if we didn't have Cindy and her Atomic Heritage Foundation, if you go back and look at the number of years that we were working toward getting a Manhattan Project National Historical Park, you'll find that she's been right in the middle of that. Not only that, and helping us there for 10 to 15 years it took to do it, but also with the K-25 initiative. She worked with Bill Wilcox closely and with Gordon Fee and others to help us with the initiative that we have that has now resulted in one of the best museums you're going to find anywhere. That K-25 History Center is just fabulous. And she continues to work with us as we're looking at what's to be done at the footprint and of the K-25 building. So you're right, Cindy's been a friend for a long time, and we're glad to have her with us today. So Cindy, welcome to Hidden Histories.
Well, thank you very much. This is very appropriate, a secret city having a hidden history.
Yeah, we do. And we've had the opportunity to bring several folks on that have shared information that we might not have otherwise had readily available. So we'll look to bring some hidden history out from your perspective too, while we have the conversation today.
I know you'll get me in trouble.
I would want to mention that we do appreciate what you've done in Oak Ridge over the years, and you might start by just telling us a little about how the Atomic Heritage Foundation came to be. I know that you were in the Department of Energy at one time and then transitioned to a more fun activity, if you might think of it that way. And then tell us about your connection to Oak Ridge. So start us off that way, if you will.
Okay. Well, I have had a very checkered career, got to admit it. I know Keith now is teaching high school, and that's where I began. Yeah, I was a history major, got a master's in history at Yale, and ended up teaching in New Haven public high schools, which were a challenge. I learned more from the kids and from that experience than I'm sure they ever did from me. It was a wonderful experience, but it was challenging, and it gave me some insight into African American and inner city problems that I otherwise, probably wouldn't have had. I certainly didn't have in growing up in south of Boston. So at any rate, so I came to Washington, D.C. and started working for a congressman. And he was from Flint, Michigan, famous now for the poison drinking water. But at any rate, I learned how the Hill worked or doesn't work or whatever. I learned out about being on the Hill from the inside. And that was very helpful because I sold that experience to EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. And it was only a 2-year-old organization, 1974. And I worked on pending legislation that, lo and behold, passed. And so then I became an expert in toxic substances. Who would guess, right? History to, anyway. So fast forward 20 years at EPA. Actually, it was more like 24 because I took a segue to work with local governments. This is very helpful. I worked 4 years for the IMCA, which was, sounds like the YMCA, but it really was the International City County Management Association that represents, city managers and appointed county officials. And I learned how local governments have to cope with all these unfunded mandates, and how many of them said they had the best job in the world. They loved it, but it was certainly challenging. So I did get a look at that third tier. And if you look at the federal government and the state government, local governments, I got a sense for how they work, which was, again, very helpful for what I later did, working with local governments on the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. But how did I get there? After I worked on this IPA, I stretched it out for all 4 years. You're not supposed to, as a federal employee, be gone on a special assignment like I had for more than 4 years. So I had to decide. And it was at that point that the Clinton administration was coming in. And I met Tom Grumbly, who was just appointed to be Assistant Secretary at the Department of Energy for Environmental Management. And he was setting up a new office called the Office of Public Accountability. And he was impressed with the fact that I had worked on the Hill, and then I worked with local governments, and I worked with the Environmental Protection Agency for all those years. So he brought me on, and I worked to try to set up the citizen advisory boards. There's one at Oak Ridge and 12 other sites around the country. So that got me flying. That got me down to Hanford. It got me to Los Alamos. It got me to Rocky Flats. It got me to Fernald. It got me to all these hotspots. I mean, not tourist hotspots. But anyway, sites that were important to the history of the nuclear weapons complex. That was something that wasn't covered in my history programs. It was a secret. It was a secret history. Really, it was not taught. It was confidential all those years, and it didn't make it into the textbooks. So it, for me, was a real post-grad education. I would read my inbox on Saturdays and Sundays during the 4 hours I watched my two sons play on two different little league teams for 2 hours apiece. I sat there with my inbox. But what was interesting was that one of my sons was a teammate of Senator Frist's son. And he sat on the bleachers. And one time I said, hey, you might be interested in this. And I gave him City Behind a Fence. And he loved it. He was a real reader. He was wonderful. So anyway, you never know who's going to be sitting on the bench beside you.
You're right. You don't ever know what the connections are going to be that really turn into some great results. So giving that book to Senator Frist was a good move.
Right. So anyway, I also discovered, that unlike being at the Department of Energy, where I was for 6 years, and there were all these shackles. I mean, you were in your peg, in your niche, and you were supposed to do what you were told to do. It's almost like General Groves all over. And you weren't supposed to go unilaterally up to the Hill and say, hey, could we have $1 million to help fund the Manhattan Project for the Department of Energy, and shore up some of these buildings that are going to be lost if we don't, put a roof on them or some such thing. But that was a no-no. You had to go through the Office of Congressional Affairs. In fact, at one point, at the end of my 6 years, I was assigned to the Office of Congressional Affairs, and I still couldn't, get the permission to go up there to, kind of pitch the Manhattan Project preservation, because it was small potatoes. I mean, the department has a $23 billion budget. It did then. It's probably bigger now, but anyway, it's a sizable budget. And you wouldn't think $1 million here or there would be noticed, but they didn't want someone saying, well, I'm for the Department of Energy and we need this little bit of money for this, when they wanted to keep the attention focused on the big dollar items. And I can certainly understand that, but truthfully, it was frustrating. I remember once trying to convince the senator, he was Secretary Pena. He came after Hazel O'Leary as Secretary of Energy. And I wanted to kind of let them know all about, important Manhattan Project properties. And I had the briefing already, and I did get an appointment with the gatekeeper. And she looked at the briefing. She said, "Who told you to do this?" Well, no one. That's not the way you're supposed to behave in the bureaucracy. I was a misfit, clearly misfit all around. But anyway, I must first credit Skip Gosling, who was the chief historian at the time I was there. And he told me that the department had was about to lose the Manhattan Project properties at Los Alamos. And I said, how's that? And he said, well, the laboratory said they must be destroyed because they are contaminated. And that paperwork went through to the state of New Mexico, and they said, check, we're happy to have it gone. Well, it turned out the contamination, you think if the Los Alamos National Laboratory says something's contaminated, what do you think of? Plutonium, uranium, yep. Something radioactive. Well, right. It happened to be a mix. One of the threats might have been highly enriched uranium tailings in pipes that were underground in one of the sites, but those pipes had already been removed. So, that wasn't it. So the only two other things on their petition to get them permission to take them down was that there might have been hantavirus. Any outhouse, any abandoned garage in New Mexico and probably all 50 states that's been sitting around for a while that's open access to mice and other rodents may well have hantavirus. It's just from droppings and other such thing. And it's very easy to remove. A little Lysol will do it. But that was one of the culprits. And the other was asbestos shingles. Yeah. So the beach site buildings were sided with asbestos shingles made with, and that was very common in before 1972 when we banned the use of asbestos in consumer and commercial products. And ironically, it was the asbestos shingles that may have prevented the buildings from being totally destroyed. There was a fire in 2000 called the Cerro Grande fire.
Yes.
Went up to the gates of the laboratory.
It actually got very close to some of those buildings you're talking about.
Yeah, well,
went over one of them. Went right over it.
Yep, in this compound where the V site, which was one of the key properties we were trying to preserve. I have a picture of it. How do I show this? Do I want to share my screen?
Sure. Yeah, just get the picture up and then share your screen.
Yeah, it's here. Now, how do I make it full? Make the picture full size?
Actually, share your screen and then select that picture.
Yes, select.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see here. You're right. I better share it first, and then you can help me make sure we all see.
Yeah, if you share it, we'll help you.
Okay, here we go. Oh, I had a choice. Now, participants can see this screen.
We see your desktop is what we see.
Okay, well, I will move this center stage.
Yeah, see if you can, there you go. That's it. We can see it.
That's it. Which button do I push to make it bigger?
You'll have to go up and say slideshow.
Right. And then presentation view?
I think so. Try it and see.
That's presenter view.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
There you go. There you got it.
All righty. So this is a before picture, and clearly it doesn't look like much. I mean, it needs to be saved. I mean, it is dilapidated. It looks like an overgrown garage, but it happens that these high bay doors, these doors that are extra high, were that high so that they could fit the 6-foot diameter gadget or the test bomb built for the Trinity site in Alamogordo, New Mexico. So it inside had a big hook on top on the suspended from the ceiling, so they could test it and figure out whether the interior parts are going to fall apart if you shake it and such things. It wasn't loaded with plutonium. They were just trying to figure out if the implosion lenses would hang together in a stressful situation. But it's remarkable. At any rate, we couldn't get any traction with the Department of Energy. They thought, we were crazy. So we invited first of all, we invited Richard Rhodes, who was lionized by people interested in the Manhattan Project for his book in 1986, which won the Pulitzer Prize, The Making of the Atomic Bomb. And he said that we preserve what we value of the physical past because it specifically embodies our human, social, and political past. So we had a selling job to do with the laboratory, but he was very helpful in articulating why we need to preserve these. And the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation, which advises the President and Congress, it's a council of about 30 people, half government, half private experts in historic preservation. And they came to see it. And they were in awe of it. They said, these properties are monumental in their lack of monumentality. That was half a joke, but at any rate, Carol Schull, who was then the keeper of the National Register, I don't know if I could pick her out, but she said, these are not only National Historic Landmark caliber, and there are only a couple thousand of those in the country, George Washington's Mount Vernon and Betsy Ross's flag and Harriet Tubman's brownstone, but these are World Heritage Site caliber. I mean, so if you didn't think they looked like much, these buildings, you can see it was a compound that was like a big, had 5 buildings. And these 2 buildings were sheds of sorts, and they were totally destroyed by the fire. And another building behind the V site. But these asbestos shingles saved the day, and the V site stands. Yes. Yeah, there it is, looking monumental, right? And there's they use a candy kettle to get the plastics right. So, they just took from Hershey's chocolate factory, these machines to melt the plastic explosive materials. Anyway, wow. It's amazing. The whole story of innovation and creativity in the Manhattan Project is unsurpassed. I loved it. Anyway, so the lab said, okay, it's going to be $3 million. We don't have the money. So, ta-da, we did have a chance to enter the Save America's Treasures sweepstake. That is the Department of Energy. And I got the okay from the Secretary Bill Richardson, who put together an advisory council of people from across different parts of the department. And we reached out to all the regional offices, and they came up with 7 proposals. And lo and behold, 2 of them won. But at first, the Los Alamos properties were in the reject pile. They didn't meet National Park Service standards. But fortunately, just good luck would have it, 3 of the 5 panelists for the National Park Service had been on that visit as part of the advisory council. And they said, where's the V site? Otherwise, it would not have been pulled out of the pile. It just didn't have any pedigree. So, and it was rejected, and we saved it. So that was given a $700,000 grant. And this EBR-1, Experimental Breeder Reactor 1, built in Idaho, was given $320,000. But the hook was you had to match it dollar for dollar. Who's going to do that? Well, I had the right number of years in, and my little office, or the office I was then assigned to, was given an early buyout opportunities. So I said, okay, I'll take it. This will be my segue to my next real job. And of course, 20 some years later, I'm still doing it.
I hear you. Yeah.
It's been really fun. Who knew? At any rate, I was lucky to partner with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So that gave me the umbrella of a 501(c) tax exempt organization. But I realized right away we needed to engage with local, state, and congressional leaders to get any traction to raise the money we needed. So, at any rate, we did a lot of things with Los Alamos. Senators Bingman and Domenici were really fabulous. Domenici happened to be the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, Appropriations Committee, and his staff was very helpful. Anyway, the county's restoration of Fuller Lodge, which with these vertical logs sucked up water like a straw and were totally rotting from the inside. And it cost them $370,000 to restore it and put in sort of steps so that these logs were not sitting in puddles after a big rain. Anyway, but that, because the Park Service people who were kind of monitoring how we were doing toward getting the matching money wanted us to succeed. They said, oh yeah, that'll count. Count as part toward the in-kind matching. And then we had events, any number of events. This is from the local magazine. They put a big, spread together we had 7 events in 3 days, a weekend. And Richard Rhodes was wonderful, kicking off a lecture, and we had a dinner, and Udall and Domenici came. Anyway, it was quite good. I did this just to show you what it takes. You have to be scrappy to do these things. I had no staff, nobody. It was me. And my sister-in-law said, well, you can't go out there with nobody. I mean, I was partnering with the Los Alamos Historical Society, but it's not quite the same. If something goes wrong, you have nobody to say, oh, help. So I had my niece, who had just graduated from college and, kind of working at odd jobs. She came out and saved the day because we had a lunch that Domenici was invited to, but he got detained at the previous event and was very, very late. And this lunch was in the senior center, and the front doors were closed because it was Saturday. And his staff car could drive up and see the closed door and just drive away. So wow. Sarah went out with a big sign and flagged him down. And he came in, she directed him to the back door. And by that time, we had already gone through 8 other speakers. I mean, anybody. Oh, do you want to speak? Oh, sure. Here, have the mic. And he came in and he said to me, oh, what am I supposed to talk about? Like the weather? No, and he sort of takes it from the top. Like people hadn't heard, yes, we want to save Manhattan Project Properties. I don't know. He did beautifully. Everybody liked him, and it was shown on TV repetitively. They had a TV thing, but it's amazing. You can do a lot with smoke and mirrors, It looked like a big outfit, but it was crazy. It was crazy. But that led to our getting the go-ahead for the Atomic Heritage Foundation. I had begun the paperwork to create a 501c3, to create this organization. My husband had helped he's a lawyer, so he helped somebody else get the paperwork for a 501c3, and he said, well, here's the paperwork, just put your name instead of this name. Bring it around, So I did, and it worked. So we got in February, almost 20 years ago in February, we got the designation, and we were good to go, except we didn't have any money. So I had used, we had more symposia. That was April. I think this happened before that. I don't know if this is the kind of thing. Yeah, we did. This is what happened. This is, of course, the Capitol. It is very near to my house in that all I need to do is take the metro, and Ray has done this many times and photographed the Capitol grounds and the Senate and the House buildings. So he knows exactly how close everything is. And of course, also
I do. I appreciate the time we came to your house while we were up there. And, and I do know how close you are to the Capitol.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, I just went down one evening and sort of figured, well, people will have gone home. It's 5:30. Most people, at least the clerical staff, who are the sort of watchdogs for the principals, will no longer be there. And I went to the various Senate offices to kind of leave a package if no one was there. And then I wandered down to the appropriations offices, and there was a clerk there's an anteroom and the lobby room, and then behind was where his desk was. And I wandered into the anteroom and saw no one, and I said, hello. And he said, who's there? And he said, what do you want? And I said, just 2 minutes. I have to tell you about the Manhattan Project. Just 2 minutes of time. We need some money to preserve these properties. They're in danger of being lost. And he said, oh, and he had this big spreadsheet on his desk and a pencil in his hand. He said, well, how much do you need? I said, oh, 2.5 million. Not expecting him to come up with something that sounded not too big and not too small, but just right. So he says, okay, where shall I take it? And having sat through 6 years of DOE budget exercises for a week at a time each, I tried to think of the niche that would be the least defended. And I said, field management. And so he said, okay. And he put it in field management, 2.5 million. But it didn't get through the House. The House staff said, oh, no, we know DOE. They'll ask for 2.5 this year, and next year it'll be 5, and the year after it'll be 10, or it'll go to 20, and then it'll be 50. And pretty soon, just no stopping. So what we need is a study. We need to find out how many properties there are, how many are worth preserving, and how much it's going to cost. So they wrote into the budget language, here's $250,000. They moved the decimal point 2 places and allocated $250,000 or $250,000 to do this study. And then it came over. I knew nothing of this. Nobody called me to say what was going on until I got a call from one of the congressional staff saying, oh, we have $250,000 for the Atomic Heritage Foundation. I said, really? Anyway, it was put into the budget language. And there was a little back and forth between DOE budgeteers saying, what is this? And the congressional people. And they said, no, this is for Cindy Kelly. And so anyway, it didn't take too much to clarify, with a letter from the chairman of the budget committee to say, hey, this is for the Atomic Heritage Foundation. So that was what was a big breakthrough. So it pays to have access. I don't know, just do your thing, right? So
it pays to have the knowledge of how to get through that system, which you had, but it also pays to have the courage to know when to walk into an empty office and say, I'd like some help.
I don't know. It was just very fortuitous. I mean, there could have been 1,000 other people sitting at that desk who would have said, scram, or called the marshal to drag me out of there. But fortunately, it was before 9/11, and it was open, and people or more accessible. So lucky me, we then had meetings. This is how I got to Oak Ridge, a long-winded answer. This is how I got to Oak Ridge, because I had meetings at each of the 3 major sites to talk about, now, what are we going to do with these Manhattan Project properties? Which ones should we keep? How much is it going to cost? What roles should DOE, the National Park Service, state and local governments play? And what action should Congress take? So this is 2003, and the report is due. So we worked, we had the meetings from February to March 2003. And in each one, we invited people from the local Park Service headquarters. So in Oak Ridge, we had people from Atlanta and so forth. And it was really interesting. And it was the first time, Bill Wilcox told me, it's the first time he thought about, maybe we ought to preserve some of this Manhattan Project history through the properties. So it was kind of a galvanizing series of events. And it was quite exciting. And I was able to, I put together a report to Congress that we, had to send through DOE. And then right after that, we had another symposium, and it was, we were invited to publish that symposium. So I used the back half, of the book for the symposium for the recommendations. So we were able to get it out to a wider audience. But one of the recommendations was to consider a national special resources study. That's the first step in creating a park.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't just create a park. You have to go through this study process, which I think.
And I might note that this is 2003. Now, right. We established the park in November of 2015. Right. So realizing we're talking about 12 years of effort here to get to a national park.
Yep. It was complex. I mean, in fairness to the Park Service, they usually, they say that it's 2 years to do a special resource study, but there were 3 different sites. In fact, they added a 4th one. Dayton, Ohio was actually added as part of the study. So there was like 4 different, studies going on simultaneously.
And just a little more insight into that. That study was going on, Dayton being included, and then there was the hiccup when the study got moving along pretty well. There was a hiccup that said, "Oh no, radiation's concerned here. Oh, maybe we'll just have the park in Los Alamos."
Oh yes, that was the first recommendation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I remember talking with Skip Gosling about that. He was beside himself, not knowing what to do. And, my comment was, look, 60 cents of every dollar spent during the Manhattan Project was spent in Oak Ridge. You can't leave Oak Ridge out. I mean, come on. So we put a strategy together. You were involved in just raising the issue to the point that they had to back away from that and recognize that those 3 sites were important, not just Los Alamos.
And I think that then led to the compromise that it would be jointly administered with the Department of Energy.
Excellent point. I believe that, and Skip was involved very heavily in getting that commitment from the Department of Energy, because the Park Service was scared to death that they were going to get these buildings given to them that had this contamination there. I mean, even if it was gone, the fact that it once had any radioactivity was frightful to the Park Service. Now, the Department of Energy understood that you can clean that stuff up, you can protect people from it. That was just a different set of understanding between these 2 bureaucracies. And if we hadn't reached that agreement, I think the park would never have been formed. You're
right. Absolutely. There were so many close calls.
Yeah.
It's really quite remarkable. And well, since the first time we had hearings on the special resource studies, it was during the George W. Bush administration, whose policy was no new parks.
Right.
And I was invited to testify. This is, when the whole thing was way below the radar. And the other 4 people testifying in in favor of different parks around the country. The Park Service summed things up at the end and said, no, we are opposed to the first one. We are opposed to the second one. We are opposed. He said, all other 4 ones, we are opposed. When he got to ours, he said, we're not opposed, which was a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're really lucky because it was so bipartisan. Look there's Doc Hastings, who's a leading Republican on the House side, head of the Energy Relevant Natural Resources Committee. We had Jeff Bingaman and Maria Cantwell, both Democrats, but then there's Pete Domenici and Lamar Alexander, who were leading Republicans. So we had a wonderful bipartisan and very strong. There's Patty Murray, who she was a Democrat, but very powerful woman, Senator Tom Udall. I mean, we were so lucky to have all the stars aligned in those leaders.
We were. You're exactly right. Having Lamar Alexander involved from Tennessee was a key, and he would jump on board at exactly the right time to add the emphasis. But as you well know, Doc Hastings is the one that, as he was leaving his tenure, leaving out of Congress, he called in all that he could from people that owed him and said he wanted the park. And I believe that was one of the things that helped us get over the hurdle at the very end, was him taking that personal leadership.
Yep, no, it was fabulous. No, we were very, very lucky. What is ironic is I ran into former Secretary of Interior who had dealt with Hastings all through the Clinton administration. And he said, I said, I think we might get our park. He said, really? And he said, oh, well, I said, Dr. Hastings really likes it. And he said, that's the only park he's ever liked. He used to be Mr. No. I mean, he really was a thorn in the side of efforts to get new parks, established. And ironically, the bill to create the Manhattan Project Park that he really, really wanted before he retired, as Ray was saying, it was the engine for this huge choo-choo train that was laden with other parks. It ended up with 97 different pieces of park legislation. So it became this huge omnibus bill that created, I think, 14 new parks and 27 revisions to existing parks and 50 some wilderness expansion areas. I mean, it was just an enormous, there had been pent up, no legislation was able to get through since the first year of the Obama administration, 2009. There had been another kind of surprise omnibus bill that got through. So the bill legislation went through in December 2014. So it had been 5 years before anything had been passed. And so he really, he put out the kibosh on park sites, very, very religiously for years and years. And then as he tried to leave and get his one park through, it became the vehicle for all these others. But anyway, there we go.
That's it. And that was an exciting time to see that kind of activity. Well, Cindy, we're going to have you back on again, okay? Because we've only begun. We will do another hidden history, and you're bringing out some really good hidden history. But we will do a continuation of this one for sure, because we didn't even get to some of the very exciting things that you've accomplished. You did a good job bringing us up to where we got the park, or we're about to. But we'll want to conclude today's session and then bring you back again, if that would be all right.
Sure, be very happy to. That'd be great. I always enjoy with you too.
Yeah, if you'll remove the share on your screen.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Stop share.
Stop sharing. Yeah.
There you are.
And that'll bring us back. And Keith, you want us to put a wrap on this for today, and then we'll schedule her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was great. You getting up to that point, and all that was very interesting. Kind of behind the scenes work of how all this, all the background, which is great to know. But now I'm anxious to continue on with the story and take it on and talk specifically about some of the. I know you've been very active in all the sites, but specifically in Oak Ridge over the years, and you've published books, you've done all kinds of things, and you got with the once the park came to be. I mean, you were right in the thick of helping establish procedures and policies and programs, for the park to use. So we're anxious. We're very anxious to hear all about that as well. So,
well, great. I enjoy talking about this. Somebody may come in the dark of night and so you did what?
That's all right. That's usually when things get done. Is when you just kind of say, a friend of mine. We always have a saying. A friend of mine. He and I once we were doing something that we had never done before. And I said, do you think we can do this? He says, well, we're as smart as the next people, I suppose. I guess there's no reason why we can't even try. So that's when great things get done, is when somebody just has a vision and says, this is what I'm going to do. So
there you go. Yeah.
So anyway, well, thank you, Cindy, so much. We will definitely have you back just right after the first of the year, and we'll continue this. Ray, do we have someone scheduled next time?
We do. Yeah, we've got Cameron Reed, who's going to come and talk to us. Cameron, he's written a book about the Manhattan Project. He also has done the research on how much electricity was used in Oak Ridge and of the silver that came to Oak Ridge. He's an authority on how that process took place. So we'll have an interesting conversation with Cameron in a couple of weeks.
All right, great.
Cameron's great.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, Ray. Thank you, Cindy, so much for your time. We look forward to having you back on soon.
Well, thank you folks, for inviting me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And folks, thanks for watching. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another edition of Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City.